Hey guys, this is chapter 10 on death and dying. So this is our last chapter in the textbook that we will cover. Hopefully I will be able to complete this chapter in just either one or two video sessions. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So chapter 10 starts talking about what is death, the different definitions to death, and there's two types of death that your book talks about. First one is functional death. So this is missing heartbeat, missing breathing, when somebody has stopped those biological functions and they cannot be successfully resuscitated. That is what we call functional death. Then you have brain death. This is where there's no brain activity going on at all. So nothing to show that there's any type of thought pattern, emotions, anything like that going on. So all brain waves have ceased. And people will use both of those to describe and to determine one's death. Sometimes they will use brain death over functional death and vice versa. So it really kind of depends on the situation. When there's brain death, you cannot resuscitate brain death. There's no way to bring back any type of brainwave activity. Unlike with functional death, we can try to resuscitate with chest compressions, things like that. They may not always be done accordingly and successfully, but we can at least try. But unlike brain death, there's no way to try to resuscitate those people once that occurs. So there's different types of death as they occur throughout the lifespan and how we react to that type of death. So in infancy and early childhood. So infancy, even though in the United States we are one of the most industrialized and developed countries, we still have a very high rate of infant mortality. And when children die through either a miscarriage or die stillborn, or from sudden infant death syndrome, which is the most common type of infant death, parents are really shocked and, of course, shooken to the core of their soul. They're depressed. They may suffer from PTSD because there's really just no explanation for the most part why their baby has died. And it really leaves the parents thinking, what did I do? What could I have done differently? I couldn't protect my baby. This is all my fault, when in actuality, it wasn't. So parents feel a lot of guilt when deaths occur in the first year or two of life. And then when we move to early childhood, accidents still continue to be the number one reason why children pass away in early childhood. Again, the loss is profound for parents. Parents may blame themselves, car accidents, other accidents, swimming accidents, things like that are the top reasons why children die at this age. Then early conceptions of death. If you were to ask a little child, what is death? Some children may say, oh, it's just somebody going to sleep for a little bit and then they wake up. So they really don't have what your book calls a realistic view of death. They see death as temporary, usually before the age of 5. However, if it's a close family member, sometimes children think that they are responsible for that person's death, when in actuality, of course, we know they are not. It's usually not until around age 9 or 10 that children start to see death as something being universal in nature, and that there are different cultural awareness to death responses. So different customs, and this is where different religions come into play, other things that traditionally explain death. Children start to understand those differences a little bit more. Then death in adolescence. Of course, adolescents' view of death is unrealistic. It's not going to happen to me. They're unique. That personal fable where, teenagers start to think they're invincible. However, the leading cause of death is still accidents, then followed by suicide, cancer, homicide. We're starting to see an increase in some communities because of increase in violence as well. Death in young adulthood is, again, the response is quite shocking when you have early adults, die from accidents, illnesses, things like that. Here they're just starting their own life. They're beginning their new relationships with their partners and jobs. They're starting to plan for their future. So it's really kind of hard still when we see, your peers around your ages starting to die for unknown reasons or for reasons that could have been prevented. And a lot of times your response to death, again, can mirror your religious beliefs. Some of you may, deny that you're going to, ever die because you don't see that being an impending situation in your life. And then by middle adulthood, the main cause of death is usually life-threatening diseases, heart attacks, strokes, things like that, because remember we talked about in middle adulthood, increases of certain diseases start to come into play. Of course, more people begin to aware and accept death, but they still may have their fear. And of course, I've talked about this myself. Once you become a parent, that fear of death, especially having younger kids, can really cause some anxiety for you. But understanding that we all, will die and live in each day to its fullest can really kind of help curb those type of anxieties. Death in late adulthood, because people are seen to have more deaths during this age group, and they know they're getting closer to it, people tend to have less anxiety. The most common causes of death in late adulthood: cancer, heart disease, strokes, things like that. Of course, decrease in cognitive decline, things like that. Senior citizens typically are more concerned at this point with the value of their life and what they can still accomplish, but also finding that balance of they really don't want to be a burden with any type of terminal illness for their family members. So they know they're going to die, especially if they're in the latter part of their years. It may be still hard for them to talk about it because it brings it into their awareness, and they really don't want to bring it out in the open because that means it's a whole lot more closer than what they originally thought. And everybody has their own unique reaction to death. So, based on religious beliefs or just cultural expectations, some people are more forthcoming with their beliefs about death, and it doesn't cause them a whole lot of anxiety compared to other people. So there's different cultural and societal views of death. Some societies view death as a punishment or as a judgment. Again, that can center around religion or many other different things. Some people see it as more of a redemption or as an eternal part of a new life that will begin after their death. Some religion and cultures believe in reincarnation, where they will become something else and come back to the planet. Others see an earthly life as, this is it. There's nothing beyond this. And then, of course, in some cultures, children learn about death at a very early age, and it's more welcoming, and it doesn't cause any anxiety because it is a part of their culture. So people who study death are called thanatologists. So they study death and dying. They help kind of teach people about death and how realistic death is. And it helps people kind of confront their feelings more so they're not feeling anxious about that. There's different types of death education. There's crisis intervention. So when death occurs, counselors will come in and talk to students. So typically, when we've had deaths at MHS or at St. John's River State College, they will bring in extra counselors to talk to students and faculty to help open up their feelings about that. Some communities and colleges and even high schools have what they call routine death education. It's a course, and they talk about it to help prepare students feel more open about it. And then death education for the helping professions. guidance counselors, psychologists, social workers, teachers, things like that, they continue to get health education so that if there are students that pass away or other professionals that they know pass away, they can successfully talk to other people and their students about it. So there's really been an increase in death education going on across many communities and states. So now we're going to move on to 10.2, which is understanding the process of dying. And this is based on one theory of dying based on Kubler-Ross's theory, or not Mary, sorry, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's theory of death and dying. There's 5 different stages here that we're going to talk about, but keep in mind, not everybody will go through these stages the same way, and they're not universal. This is just a theory, so there's really not any research behind it. It is an accepted theory of how we deal with death. So the first stage is denial. So people resist the whole idea that one has died or that they are going to die. So I'm not going to die, she's not going to die, that type of thing. It is a defense mechanism, so kind of think back to Freud whenever you learn those, and it allows you to absorb difficult information better. Then from denial, we have anger. Why me? Why not her? Why not somebody else? A lot of times people can be very difficult to be around during this stage. Then the third stage is bargaining. They try to negotiate their way out of death. Please, if my grandma just lives, I'll be a better person. They kind of think, that they can make a deal with God or whatever religion that they have. Then we have depression. They're overwhelmed by a sense of loss. So there's 2 types of depression. We have reactive depression. This is where they're sad because there's a loss of dignity, respect, things like that. Then preparatory depression is you're anticipating the death. So somebody who's going through cancer treatments and they're in hospice. We know hospice, the chances of you living past 6 months or a year are very slim. So you prepare for the inevitable death. And then acceptance. Individuals kind of make peace with death. They say that they're okay with it and that there's really not a whole lot of emotion that goes with this stage. People begin to slowly move on with their life. Again, these stages do not have to go in any order. They don't last an extended period of time either. Some people will move through those quickly. Others will take more time with them. Again, this is not universal in nature. Here's a little chart that just kind of shows you the different stages and how that kind of happens. So you kind of start over here with stability of health, then you get a difficult diagnosis, denial, anger is your emotion, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. So again, like I said, doesn't apply to all situations. It's not all culturally exclusive as well. It's just an accepted theory. There are a lot of books on Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's theory that she's written for not only adults, but children, things like that. And she's an accepted theory here in Western culture. But keep that in mind. It's a cultural theory. So there's other type of theories as well. Schneiderman's theory suggests that there's more themes to death. So sense of unfairness or pain, things like that. And Charles Core suggests that people who are dying face psychological tasks that they have to go through that will help lessen their stress as they go through the process. So we're going to pause here and we'll pick up for the second part of the chapter with video number 2.